Can you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Public comment will occur during the public comment portion of the meeting and is done via raising your hand remotely or in person. During public comment, once acknowledged, please state your name and ward so that it can be included in the minutes, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. Public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Are there any additions and deletions to the agenda?
I just wanted to know under Superintendent Communication, the discussion of the Community Resource MOU will be in non-public.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, okay. All right, so moving on to public comment per policy BEDH. Is there anyone in the room who would like to make public comments? I do not see anyone. Is there anyone online?
There's no one online.
Okay. All right, we'll return to public comment at the end of the meeting. Correspondence. Thank you, Mary. Consent agenda. We need a motion to approve the public minutes from March 20th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the Lebanon School Board minutes from March 20th, 2024.
Motion by MJ.
I'll second.
John can second. All right, second by John. All right. I know, fighting for seconding. All right. Are there any corrections or changes to the minutes? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on the Lebanon School Board meeting minutes for Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So 8 in favor, 1 abstention. All right, moving on to nominations, renominations, and resignations and retirements. I need a motion on those.
I'll make a motion to approve the nominations and resignation sheet dated March 27th, 2024.
Okay, motion by MJ, second by Mary. Are there any questions or discussions on the nominations or resignations?
Was this one of our regular full-time English teachers, or was it somebody covering for?
She was a humanities teacher, full-time, and her husband has been relocated to Dartmouth, so.
Isn't she the council advisor?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, we thank her for her service.
She will be missed.
Yes. All right, so we'll vote on if there's no other questions, on the nominations and resignations. All those in favor of accepting them? Okay, any opposed? No, all right, thank you. Okay, I do not see our student report person, so we will move on past that in case she shows up later. We'll circle back. And then that moves us to the SAU leadership team update, the superintendent update.
Sure. So tonight I'm going to provide a brief update on the ongoing initiatives within our district. We continue to explore hosting a public pre-K early childhood classroom at Hanover Street Elementary School with ongoing discussions and meeting with the Boys and Girls Club. We anticipate sharing more information on this at the upcoming April board meeting, hopefully with a potential MOU to bring forward. I'd like to thank the staff and students of Lebanon High School for their successful testing. They went through the PSAT, SAT, so we have 130 students taking the SAT, 125 took the PSAT at the 10th grade, and 149 at the PSAT 9th grade. Finally, we're conducting interviews for the permanent principal of Lebanon Middle School position tomorrow. Following the timeline, we aim to present a candidate for the April 17th board meeting, so that will conclude my update tonight. Any questions?
No questions? I have a question about the agenda. Sorry, not about your update.
Sure.
So is Karen supposed to be on the agenda because she has a slideshow in the?
I believe she's under new business 10C, and then I have a couple here just if there's any questions about the assurances. Both Karen and Karen are back there.
Okay. Do we want to, if we're going to go into, do we want to do non-public now, or do we want to do them first and then?
Let's do those first. And
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Okay, so we lied. We are going to change the agenda a little bit.
Sorry.
We're going to go to Tim's update, and you can talk about the general assurances as well if you need to, or if we have any questions about that. Can we do that?
Sure, I wasn't planning it.
Or Tim's got the business administration.
Right, business administration
Yeah,
update,
and
but
then
then-
general assurance is under new business, 10A and B.
And then C, right? We want to move all of that
Yep.
up. Okay, so we're moving 10, A, B, and C up to after Tim's business administrator update. Okay, Tim.
Good evening. Welcome to Richard. I think it's said already by John. A couple things before we get to the budget update. I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction at Hanover Street High School. It's going well.
Hanover Street Elementary and Lebanon High School.
Hanover Street Elementary.
And Lebanon High School, yes.
What did I say? Hanover Street
High School, yeah.
Shorthand.
That's okay.
So, as the board knows, we have some money left that from interest being made, and then contingencies money built into the budget for unknown stuff. Altogether, we had a budget of about $1 million, a little bit more. So the board, we presented to the board, and the board approved a list of projects to be done to sort of be tackled. Where we stand now, we got pricing back, and the renovation of the upstairs bathrooms will probably not take place. We got the first price was too much. So as of now, we're planning on doing the special education space in that wing and the nurse's office. And it's an inexact science, so we're still making money on interest, and we have to spend the money. So that's what we know we can do. We will not have enough money to do the renovations of the bathrooms upstairs. We will do the bathroom downstairs, but that's much more sort of cosmetic. And then there'll probably be a little bit of money left at the end of the project that we'll have to figure out, but it'll be probably in the tens of thousands versus several hundred thousand, which is what the bathrooms cost.
Tim, that will include the matching the colors, right? The facing
Yeah, that's-
of
right.
Hanover Street and the high school. That was one of the requests too, is making sure that pink
Right.
is now covered by white.
The cosmetic stuff on the outside is already planned to be done. Although the pink's gonna be gone on the Hanover Street side, we're still looking at doing some landscaping on the outside of Hanover Street, which might actually include like a new walkway and stuff. But all that stuff is, believe it or not, although it sounds expensive, it's not a large enough number to really worry about for this discussion. So the facial stuff, and then there's a beautification fund at the high school that's separate from the project. That is money that's accumulated from fees and stuff over the years. So it's going to look nice and spiffed up when we're done. But I want to let you know that it looks like the big part of the project upstairs, which is the total gutting and remanufacturing of the bathrooms upstairs, is not going to be able to happen. It's outrageously expensive, evidently. But it's good. We're going to get the whole special ed space. We're going to get the nurse's office, and we're going to get the bathrooms downstairs with a facelift. So, any questions about that?
When can we get a tour?
I would say that it looks like we're going to have temporary occupancy of the 4 classrooms and the lunchroom of Hanover Street before the end of the year. So permanent occupancy comes, we're not going to wait 12 years like here. But permanent occupancy comes after all the site work's done and trees are planted, all that stuff. But the fire department is, they've already indicated that once we have all the life safety stuff inside, they'll give us a temporary occupancy, and that'll allow some of the teachers to move into those spaces, so we can get just a head start. We don't have any plans for the cafeteria as far as programming this year, but it'll be good to have that space available. So
If people would like to look at that, we can schedule a time with
Yeah.
Principal Whelan just to go through. It's a pretty amazing space. It looks great.
Yeah, I'd also like to check out the high school.
if we did a tour, we could do that too. That's much, obviously, that's the last part, so that'll be done before school opens, but it'll take all summer. So
And even if we can't coordinate all of us, if somebody can just do a video, that we
We have some school board meetings there?
can. Well, we can technically
Yeah.
shift things around, so maybe once those spaces are done, early next year or something like that, we can have
Yeah.
a board meeting at each of the schools in the new spaces, just so people can see, even at Mount Lab, see new spaces.
So I'd like to request that those
super uncomfortable chairs at Mount
The ones that
School
lean
being
back.
included.
It's
That would be great.
replacing
Noted.
those chairs is not in the budget. So.
Tim? We're gonna talk about that.
A couple other things before we get to the budget update. I just want to let you know that I received our audit report from last year just 2 days ago. So in the next board meeting, I'll give you good reading material. I'll have just a summary of the audit. It went pretty well. We finished a food service audit. The state chose Mount Leb to review. Generally okay. I wanted to, if I can find it, for some of the findings. So one of the major things is that we do meals right for kids if they owe money, but our policy still says at the high school that you'll get a sun butter sandwich. We don't do that. So the policy committee is going to be changing that policy. It was like, honestly, we don't do that. Unfortunately, that was in writing. There's some things that, there's a lot of stuff about meal counting and menus and stuff like that. We have to change a little bit about how we serve preschoolers at Mount Leb, and which I'm not going to bore you with the details. And then we need to make sure that we do the trainings we need to do, but documentation is always hard. So it's like you go to a civil rights training, we got to have the certificate, or we can't prove it. So generally, those are the significant stuff, and they're pretty small. So we're pretty pleased. So we did get a finding, and I had to respond that when we bought there's a whole process in place for how you buy equipment using food service funds. So somebody will remember that at Mount Leb, like basically half the cost of the food equipment was in the project, and the other half we had a surplus in the food service fund that we used. But there's a whole process I'm supposed to go through to request review, pre-approval and stuff, and I kind of did it simultaneously. So that was a finding. I don't have to give the equipment back, but I have to write basically saying I'll file a process from the state and won't do it again, basically, which is good. I'm not planning on buying any more kitchens anytime soon. So that was a finding. So sometimes paperwork, I should have been on top of that ahead of time, but that all worked out. Any questions about the food service audit? I would say, and a budget sort of thing, food services, and I'll give you, as we get next month and into May, I'll give you some hard numbers, but I was looking at the food service so far this year, and we are behind budget. We're about $60,000 in the red this year. The budget that just got passed, we have a $50,000 number, but in previous years I had just budgeted 25, so the number that's in the general fund to offset that is 25. So if we're already at 60 and we have 25 to offset it, we are going to have to spend some money in the general fund to make that whole fund black. It seems to be the new normal since COVID. We ran a profit for years, but we haven't since the pandemic.
Do we have the equipment to set up the cafeteria at Hanover Street?
So in the project budget was outfitting that kitchen as a warming kitchen. I mean, it's a nice kitchen when you see it, but there's not. So there'll be like a 6-burner stove, convection oven, but it doesn't have the mixers and the separate coolers and stuff that a cooking kitchen does. So when you see the kitchen, you'll be like, well, this is nice, but it's essentially not a kitchen that's going to be approved to prepare meals there. We'll prepare them at the high school and bring them over.
And do we have all the tables and stuff like that? So
That's all in the budget, yeah. And not the food. The good thing is that the issue I talked about is a food service fund specifically. So when it gets bought out of general fund or a building fund, none of that stuff applies. So it's not an issue with Hanover Street. So the tables are not here, but they're on the way. So. Okay, the budget update. I welcome your questions. So if you're new, what I generally do from November till May is I print the budget sort of in a readable format by function. So these are the major functions according to New Hampshire school funding that apply. And I show what the budget was, any adjustments we've made, what's been spent and encumbered, and then what's remaining. The adjustments column, I do want to point out that, and I think it printed not as in color originally. I'm glad it's black and white to save money, but that adjustments column at the bottom should say 0. If it doesn't say 0, that means it did something. What I mean to 0 is that if I move money from one line, you can't just put money into a line, it's gotta come from somewhere. If there's a positive number there, then there's something that happened that I gotta tell you about. So the $94,140, this is after talking to our auditors. This is, you gotta put your Wayback Machine on way back to July, when we were talking about the cyber attack, and I had mentioned that Peter Merritt had, the previous tech director, had applied for a grant to offset some spending. It took till January to get that money, but we got the money in January. I booked it here, the beginning of February. So the reason why I booked it, basically an expenditure above the normal budget, is that's what our auditors told us to do. I wanted to put it just straight against an expense line, like an expense didn't happen, but auditors don't like that sort of stuff in fund accounting. So the budget was increased by $94,140 to equal that dollar amount that came from the grant. So it does the same thing, but in our checkbooks, we would just pretend we didn't spend $94,000. So that's what I wanted to point out. The rest of the narrative in the sort of the information packet, we are 93.2% expended. Compared to last year, we were 91.5. Through February, we had about 3.4 million left. I looked today, we're about 2.9 or 3.0 or so now. So March, we used some of that. So this seems like a significant number, but it'll go quickly on things that are not encumbered, things that come up. I do want to point out that that number that says $300,000 for student services, I got an update today. It's over $400,000 that they were wanting money for. So this number will change drastically in the next few weeks, and this is why I guess it's just the nature of the business administrator. I always get nervous that we're going to have what we need. What I want to have left at the end of the year is $1.6 million. That's $1 million to offset taxes and $600,000 to fund the cap reserve fund. So that's my goal. I don't think we're in too much trouble, but we are much more expended this year than the last couple of years, which some of you have been on the board a while. That's probably a good thing. That's why I think my nerves need to just relax a little bit. So we typically cut off purchase orders, and I'm not planning on doing it earlier, right before April break, and that's really, things get purchased after that, but that's a good time to make sure that everybody's got their stuff in, and then it pauses for a couple weeks. So, and starting next month, I'll show you the revenue side of things. So we have to balance, we have expenditures, and any money we don't spend is part of the fund balance. Any extra money we get in, excess revenue, is part of the fund balance. And I'll start showing that next month, leading to a picture towards the end of May of whether we have any projects you guys want to do or something, maybe at Hanover Street or something. We can have a conversation as to what end of year projects need to be done. So that's the future.
Any questions for Tim?
So can we talk about transportation and why that is overexpended? Right,
The
is
regular
that
ed transportation?
Yes.
Well, some of that is, I have this conversation every year, so we try to have drivers report their wages as to what they're doing, but we always have to go back and audit and say that was actually an athletic trip and not regular ed transportation, so that'll move some of that. Second part is, and I'll get you some more details as we get closer, second part is we have, thankfully, more drivers than we had when we did this budget, so we have more people on the payroll. They only get paid for what they work, but we're paying more people, which is good. Third of all is that the lease process takes time, so we buy buses and then get reimbursed from our leasing company. And as that process works through, sometimes that shows a negative for a while until it's balanced out. And I just literally got that paperwork done about 2 weeks ago. So
Can we?
awkward end to a question.
So with student services and stuff like that,
Yeah.
so when we're 2/3 of the way through the year and we're sort of seeing increased costs for out-of-district placements, what does that indicate? Like, are we having to place kids this late in the year somewhere else?
So Karen is here, that's awesome. So I would say, I don't know about that piece of it. She told me that there's people that are just being placed, sometimes by the state. So there could be people that we've done that weren't even planned on.
Come to the microphone.
Come to the microphone.
So the question has to do with increase in
Out-of-district costs.
out-of-district costs. Out-of-district costs are often due to kids who are state-placed in foster care. And so what happens is the state makes placements, residential placements, and we have to follow those students. So they may have been local kiddos, but then they get transferred to a residential placement, and we have to pick up the educational component.
Is that typical, though, that's happening late in the year? I think it, so.
There's
happens,
nothing really
yeah.
typical, to be honest. It just depends on what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no like trend or, it's just circumstances.
I think there's less foster care placements than there are needs in the state, and less group homes. So you're finding that kids that typically might have been in a group home attending a public school have been moved out of district, and those costs are more.
We also have more significantly involved children, and there are no, excuse me, level 4 placements in New Hampshire, and so they have to go out of state for level 4.
So as a reminder, most of you guys know this, but we budget during budget time for people we know are out of district. And anybody
Oh, absolutely.
who comes up after that time, which is an 18-month period. We're coming up on 15 to 18 months after we did this budget now.
Right.
So it's a long time in special
Right.
ed world.
There are caps to the amount of money that we do spend for certain students, and then the state starts to kick in after a certain amount. We also have another category of reimbursement, but it's a delayed reimbursement. And again, we hit a certain amount, but we have to pay all the upfront costs before the revenue comes back to the district. And it doesn't come directly back, it comes back in stages. And Tim can speak to like what that timeline is like, but bottom line is we have to budget for it, and then we have to pay it upfront, and then he counts it in the revenue because he has a hint of when it might be coming back in.
Yeah, so special ed aid, we get an estimate from the state where we're going to get, actually I'm getting guidance from the DRA, this is what your range will be. So that's like, I think it's a year, they've changed the rules, I think it's a year now. So the stuff we pay now, you'll see in the revenue discussion probably the fall of 25. So we'll be like, wow, we're getting more state special ed revenue than before. That's all looking back to this time. So it is, they are up front, we get it back later kind of thing. And really, it's only a percentage of it.
Another example of things that happen, and then I'll go sit down, but we have some tuition students to a particular program, and they include transportation in the costs in the invoicing. And historically, that transportation cost kept getting lumped in with the tuition, which is not appropriate categorizing of those expenses. So we recently pulled out those transportation costs and put them in the proper line, which helped with our tuition lines, but it was not helpful in the transportation lines. But we're trying to make sure things are, in the proper budget lines. So that's another example of things as we move through looking at how things have been done. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else for Tim on this report?
Yeah, I have.
John, sorry.
My question, Tim, is really about maintenance building services, and I know we've had some turnover in that department, and obviously there's a lot encumbered, which is great, but there is about 900,000 not really still there. My curiosity is there anything we're missing that we should be spending or have encumbered? We obviously want to make sure that we're prepared for things that happen, and we historically have been, but it's kind of a large number. So
It is, and I'll be glad to give you a breakdown. A lot of that is salaries. I would say that the lines have to do with building maintenance, building specific repairs, and contracted services by building. They're just about expended. So just today, Julie's like, we need more money. So the stuff that's in the budget that was supposed to be done is being done. This budget is a little awkward because Dana had left, Chris quit, didn't have Steve, so it was like Julie and I, Dana Consulting, trying to put this together. So I actually am not confident in our building specific repair number being enough. So I'm quite confident that you're going to see a significant change in this over the next 6 weeks as the money that's in those lines. So that most of the stuff in contracted services is stuff you got to do. It'll be fire extinguisher maintenance and stuff like that. They need more money to pay some of those bills, so, you'll see that, it's a good question. But we do have, we're down about, I think, 4 custodians and 2 maintenance, and then we're paying Dana, but, at a lesser rate, so we have a lot of salary built in that's in the budget that needs to be spent that we can't spend. So, thank you.
Good, thanks. Any other questions? Or Tim? Okay. All right, before we go to talk about the general assurances, Nora is here. So we're gonna jump back to the student report and come on up.
Hi, sorry, I apologize for being late and also looking crazy. I just came from lacrosse practice. So speaking of spring sports, it's all up and going, all the love sports, but we are sadly back inside due to the snow, but we'll hopefully be outside in the next week or two. So we have a lot going on this Friday. We have the job fair at Lebanon, also the 3v3 finals, and then the dance as well, which is this Friday, and I'm really looking forward to it, and other students are as well. We're working on prom and what that's going to look like. Right now, we've just sent out like a form. The prom committee sent out a form for what the theme might be, so we're looking to get some student feedback on that. We have a cookie walk student council's doing next week before spring break. That'll be a fun way to start off break, which is basically you get a bunch of baked goods, student council's making them, and then they're all set on a table and students get to walk in. They pay for a bag, and then you can shove as many baked goods in your bag as you can. So we thought that was really fun. That was at my old school, so I wanted to implement it here. And then hopefully we'll use that money towards Springfest. Yeah. And then the RILA Leadership Summer Retreat, that's starting up as well. We're trying to get, or Ms. Gobin's trying to get applicants for sophomores to go to that retreat. I did it over the summer. I thought it was a great experience, so I hope some sophomores sign up for that. I believe the Take Flight students had a field trip to Boston recently to dive deeper into what they're doing for next year, which is very exciting. Oh, also, today was SAT and PSAT day. It went very well. It was very smooth from what I heard. I took the SAT. No complications with technology at all. The PSAT at the beginning of the year. 11th grade also has the state science exam next week, so we have that. And then Council Closet, just an update on that. It's going very well. We have students renting out clothes, so if you have anything to give to the Council Closet, that would be great if you just drop it off at the Lebanon High School office. And yeah, that's it.
Any questions for Nora? The 3-on-3, they're in the finals. There's 4.
Yeah, the 3v3 finals. It's this Friday, so that's always a blast during advisory. So all the students get together in the gym and watch.
Oh, it's during advisory on
Yeah,
Friday?
during advisory. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Okay, so now we'll move on to general assurances and program assurances.
So here you have under new business the general assurances and the program assurances. These are forms required yearly by the Department of Education in order for us to receive federal grants. So grants that we participate in Title I, Title II, Title IV, IDA Part B, and our rural grants. So our team has gone through these, and then Shaylee Briggs, Assistant Business Administrator, and Karen DuBois have been last 2 days participating in a conference and training to do a consolidated application for our grants next year. So there was, I think, 200 people there trying to learn about this new process, which will be substantially different. So, but I assume that you guys review these and sign these every year. So,
Well, I do. You and I do.
Yes.
You. So I have read them in great detail, much to Tim's chagrin. But
I was hoping that was the last year.
yeah. Does anybody have any questions about the assurances?
I think one change that I was just informed that there is a new private school in Lebanon, New England Art
School of the Arts.
School of the Arts. So we will have to do equitable service application in the spring. Karen Du Bois will work on that to be able to see what funds that need to be allocated to them.
Other questions about that? No? Okay, thank you.
Can you,
Yeah.
I don't understand what you just said.
So
That's a good question.
Sure. If there are private schools or charter schools within your community, they may be eligible for some of your federal allocations. So this, the art school is a high school, which we don't accept Title funds, Title I and high school, so we don't have to share Title Is with them. But our Title II funds, which would be professional development, they could be eligible for a partial allocation for them. So we have to go through and determine, have a meeting with them to look to see if that can be done via them sharing professional development with us, us buying them books and things like that. And I think Karen's probably going to come up to talk about the IDA, charter school piece. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that charter schools are considered public school, and as such, we have students on our caseload who attend the local charter school, and they're treated just like the other students with IEPs in Lebanon schools. So they are public.
Yeah, I understand that, but the music school.
The music
Right.
school is
Less
private.
sense to me.
Yeah, so it's part of
So as a private
yeah.
school, we have to offer evaluations and assessments, and then we would offer an IEP if the student is eligible, as if they would have attended here. And then now our federal grant will have a very small amount of money that is based on a proportionate calculation that they do that has to be reserved to provide something called a services plan, not an IEP, but whatever we feel like is appropriate to offer a student.
So
It's
in
very
that-
limited.
So that would be IDA, then Title II, which is for teacher prep and professional development. I know Karen's here to talk about that, but that would be is that, again, we'd find the formula to see if they're eligible to receive a portion of our Title II dollars.
So if they have, again, like I totally understand to some extent, if there are kids that are attending that live in the Lebanon school district, but why would, if most of their pupil or student base is from outside of Lebanon, why?
Then that's that proportionate piece
that
that
is
we look to
factored
see
in.
the ones that are Lebanon students, yeah.
Okay.
If you want federal money, you gotta play by
Yeah.
federal rules.
No, it just it just seems that if they want federal funds, if they're entitled to
Right.
federal funds,
They do
then
have
they
to
should-
comply with federal regulations, so you'll often find
But
sometimes.
why wouldn't they go for those grants?
Because it's a private school versus the public school
But
component of that, so they can't go for those federal allocations, but they would have to comply by certain regulations in terms of qualified teachers and all of that. So you find that some private schools choose not to accept that money.
In a very real way, if there was a need, if there was a private school that was eligible for some money, we would be basically the fiscal agents and also the equipment agents.
So
like,
it just seems odd that we play intermediary,
Yeah.
right?
We gotta do that.
And if they can receive through a back door, not necessarily a real back door, but if they receive money through this sort of way, why can't they get it directly? I mean, it just,
think that's why the
just
federal-
me sort
yeah.
of trying to understand.
That there is no logic to that. That's a federal. I mean,
Right.
that's a
Congress.
mistake you're making. That's a federal.
Just like, what?
Like in my
program.
previous district, they would be
It's been
our
organized.
employees, but they would work for them, which made it difficult because they could be on a totally different calendar and time for their CBAs and stuff like that. So I know Karen's there, who's been 2 days fully engulfed with this new regulations, and then she just brought it to my attention, which I was not aware that we did have this private school that started this year. So
Do we have any other questions
Additions,
or anything about that specifically before?
Yeah,
Karen?
I have one random question, kind of. Would you,
Are you aware about what kind of services their summer camp? Is that going to be summer school related, and would you be responsible for any services if they were to provide summer school? I know they have a camp. I don't know the details.
That's a great question.
Okay.
I'll just start by saying that I share a lot of your questions. I have a few answers, and my understanding is it doesn't really work that way. It would be more a case where in the next 2 weeks I'll reach out to them. We're meant to have meaningful conversations annually and on an ongoing basis if they choose to participate in these grant funds, and they could then say, yes, we want to participate and we'd like to use some of these funds to provide a summer program. For example, they'll be invited to participate in our Title IV funds, a portion of which can be devoted to well-rounded students, and that could be allocated to a summer program. And we then administer that. We function as their fiscal agent. Anyone that needs to be employed for that activity would be actually an employee of our district. Any tools or supplies that we acquire through those grant funds, we own and must maintain and keep track of, but they use. It's the technical term I think would be crazy, but that's the way it works. I am optimistic that in this case, there's unlikely to be a tremendous impact because although I have not yet reached out to the school, my understanding is that they're still a relatively small school. The proportion, the calculation for this, what's on offer to them, is based on enrollment. In most cases, based on the conference I just came from, the actual dollar amount that would be deemed equitable for the Lebanon students enrolled in that school would be so small as to make it not worth the tremendous amount of paperwork that they would have to engage with us in pursuing, that they may simply opt to decline. I don't know what they'll do. This is new territory for us.
Can we make up our own paperwork to make it even more voluminous?
I'm going to send Tim to all of these meetings. It'll be great. I think we'll learn as we go, and we'll make sure to keep you informed about how this proceeds. But it's an experience that's typical in many districts, and it's a federal requirement. So,
Any other questions about this for
I think
Karen?
we're going to send them to lie.
Sure. There's lots of things we could do that we cannot do. Okay. If there's no more questions about the assurances, then we'll move on to the new curriculum resource for. Oh, sorry. Yes, let's take an action on this. I apologize. We need to. I need a motion to accept, or do we accept?
yep, you accept the
Yes,
general ed program.
okay, so the motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 general assurances, and then a separate motion for the program assurances.
I'll make a motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 general assurances as written.
So, can I get a second? Second by Mary. Okay, motion by MJ, second by Mary. No additional discussion. We've already done that. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and then
I will make a motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 program assurances as written.
motion by MJ, second by Mary. Okay, and no more additional conversation. All those in favor? Yes, okay. Any opposed? No? All right. Thank you. Now we'll move on. Thank you to the curriculum resource for K4 foundational skills and ELA, and this is also Karen.
Hi, everyone. Karen Dubois, for those of you who don't already know me, but I think I've met everyone in this room. I'm excited to speak with you today about a proposal for the first phase of our new ELA curriculum resource adoption for our elementary school grades, K through 4. First, I just want to say thank you to those of you who sent me questions about this in the last day or so. I've added some slides to make sure that everyone's on the same page. There were some questions about this at our last board meeting as well. And so I've added some content. I'm just going to beg your forgiveness as I walk you through in a little bit more detail than it might be repetition for some of you. But I want to make sure that everyone understands the why behind what we're proposing here. Something is happening with my slides. Oh,
just user error. So why do we need new resources in our elementary ELA program, English Language Arts program? Shifts at the state legislature and NHED have prompted all elementary educators to align their practice and their curricular resources to the so-called science of reading. Another term you might see associated with that is structured literacy. The state's been providing for the last 2 years educators with opportunities for training, including letters training. There's a new screening law for dyslexia that mandates that we screen all of our students twice yearly in grades K through 3. And there's additional pending legislation that may, in fact, specifically require alignment to the science of reading as soon as next fall. In addition, we have been made aware of some shortcomings of our programming by faculty and parents and some data. I'm going to walk you through that now. The faculty input in brief really grew out of that letters training. As more and more of our teachers were engaging in that robust, sort of gold standard literacy training, they were noticing that the resources we had on hand were poorly aligned to the training that they were receiving. A faculty quote was, letters is teaching me that we should do X, but the program that we have in my classroom is teaching me, is having me do Y, and those seem to be contradictory. The 3 queuing system is an older and outdated mode of literacy instruction that our current materials lean heavily on in grades K and 1, and that was specifically being something that they were being coached against using in the letters training. Parent input began to pour in, and I received several communications from parents who were concerned this fall. A quote from one parent characterized a lack of alignment to structured literacy and the science of reading as instructional malpractice. So folks were really eager to see some shifts in our instruction with their students. I've included additional data slides to help you see what we were noticing in our statewide testing. But before we get to those, what is the science of reading? There's a detailed definition from the Reading League that's broadly accepted, but to summarize, the science of reading is really a body of research, of scientific research, that establishes how proficient readers read and write, how those skills develop, why some students have difficulty acquiring those skills, and then how we can most effectively teach those skills to our students. It's really rooted in cognitive science and represents an integration of the fields of cognitive science, psychology, education, and linguistics. I'm going to pause before I keep going. Does anyone have questions? Great. So this is a snapshot from NHED. It's our SAS scores by district. Now what you're seeing here, in addition to science and math, the pink bar is our ELA proficiency district-wide, not K to 8, grades 3 through 8. We're at 62% proficiency, but do you see that gray line? The state sets growth targets that change every year, and we're falling just shy of that growth target as a district. And if you look at our 2 elementary schools, the gap is even a little bit larger. One school's at 58% proficiency, and our target is 64.4. Our other school's at 51% proficient, and our target is 62.5. Now those targets will continue to increase and go up each year, and failure to meet targets set by the state impacts our accountability measures, which can have consequences for us, so this is of concern.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Why do we have different targets if we're one district?
Because they're set by school based on past performance. So, just so that nobody panics, the news overall about our statewide testing is still net positive. This shows the state of New Hampshire percent proficient in green, And Lebanon, as a district, is at the other end of that bar in a very faded light blue. So we're still exceeding statewide performance by a good measure. We have a lot of strength in our district, but we can always do better and improve. And when we are faced with evidence that we should improve, it's incumbent upon us to do so.
Thanks. Question, are the targets and like the growth, is this a new system or is this something that has been going on?
Yeah, you know, the state has been evolving their accountability measures, and they've employed some really talented data scientists who are running that show at this point. They're speaking a language of data science that I don't pretend to understand, nor do they make it entirely clear to us. But those growth metrics have existed for some time in one way or another. My understanding is that they become more refined in the last 3 to 4 years. And they did not take into account the pandemic year, just so that you are aware. They sort of paused that year reasonably enough. That's my understanding.
So,
Oh, sorry. Does Kevin have a follow-up first?
Yeah, I was going to say my follow-up is that, and I don't know if this is a relevant question, but have we met these growth targets previously?
Previous to the last 3 years, we've not met them for the past 3 years. I have to be honest and say I'm not sure prior to that. So if you go back more than 3 years, there's that interruption of the pandemic year. And this handy data dashboard is brand new. So we've only been able to play around with it since the end of the summer. And so I have not gone back and looked deeper into the history of the growth targets specifically.
Then Jessica, and then Wendy, and then Mary.
I'm sure you're going to talk about all this, and I really appreciate your reports because they're very informative, and this is stuff that you've thought a lot about that I'm just coming to, obviously. So, but one of the things that occurs to me when I look at stuff like this is to say, okay, well, there's a lot of reasons why, you know, districts or schools don't meet particular targets. Like, there's a lot of reasons. It could be and there's a lot of reasons why there might be differences between schools in terms of performance, which you're sort of clearly seeing here. And I'm curious about how far we've delved into the question of whether it's, you addressed this a little bit at the beginning, is this a curriculum issue? Is this a teaching sort of implementation issue? There's a lot of pieces that go into this kind of performance and, you know, student preparedness. There's a lot of pieces, and so I think as we think about how to allocate resources to help improve it, you know, buying new stuff is one way is probably an important part of that, but obviously there's a lot of other ways to spend money in order to get better results. And I'm going to be interested to hear your thoughts about that.
That's a great point. I think it is important to note that basic data literacy would tell us when we look at a data point, it's a neutral fact, right? And then we need to be asking all the possible questions around what could be a root cause of that outcome. In this case, we were faced with a sort of a multifactorial tapestry of evidence suggesting that what we had in our classrooms isn't going to be what we need going forward. So if I keep going through some of those curricular aspects, then maybe we can circle back to what else. The data might mean this. It might also mean other things. And those are questions we're going to be asking on an ongoing basis, so I appreciate the point.
I think the question, though, that still sticks out to me is that there is a discrepancy between the two schools. So currently they're using the same resources. So do we have any sense of,
Yeah,
you know, sort of-
I was anticipating that I might get that question. I would say I think that historically, as far back as I have looked, there has always been a discrepancy that follows this, pattern. And I will say that, again, bearing in mind that I've only been in the district for 18 months, so my institutional knowledge is limited, but as I came on board in the fall of last year, I was asking about the ELA curriculum along with everything else, and from what I understand, implementation of ARC, which is the last resource that we adopted and the one that's currently, at least in theory, in use in our classrooms, implementation was uneven. this is all anecdotal evidence, but it was reported from a number of different places. So the building with somewhat lower rates of proficiency is the building in which ARC was more implemented with greater fidelity. So it was an uneven implementation, as I understand it. The implementation was closest to fidelity in the school that's actually somewhat lower in its ELA proficiency now, several years later. I'm not saying that that's a causal relationship. It is, and it's heavily anecdotal. So please take it for what it is. It's based on kind of as I was trying to build my own understanding of what came before. That's what my current understanding is, and that's all that it is. Should we keep going to the
Sure, and
positive, exciting outcome?
I just want to point to, I think that's one of the reasons too, is really that focus is to aligning the two elementary schools, so we can make sure the instructional practices are the same in both, so we can look at data and we can look at analysis and compare apples to apples versus that, because there's so many variables around what that implementation is.
Although in this case, it sort of makes it seem like uneven implementation had some benefits.
Right.
I'm not, again, I don't want to overstate
I understand, but I
a relation. But if we're asking the reasonable question of whether, that implementation or variance could account for these differences, I'm not sure. And I'm about to share with you a tale of two schools coming together in a unified vision of the future, so that's going to be exciting for you to hear.
So Mary had a question, so I just want to get to her question before we.
Absolutely, Mary.
So the data that that's here is over the last 3 or 4 years, and that's the beginning of SAT. And those tests weren't all the same every year; they were changed. So that I'm not so sure how you look at that data.
You're right that the test has evolved. It's been largely the same since 2021. So if we're looking at 2021, 22, and 23, those tests, at least in the ELA domain, haven't evolved as much as you're correct that there were many iterations that came before those years. It's a good point if we do look further back in the data to
Looking at different tests, right? We're looking
Pardon?
at smarter balance data.
Smarter balance data was, more like 5 to 6 years ago. Is that
Yep.
right, that they shifted to the SAS? So hopefully at least this recent year data is relatively, the tool used was relatively consistent from year to year.
And the other thing I was going to ask is the professional development piece. How is that? Is it equitable among both schools?
It certainly is now.
But it wasn't.
I'm not sure. I have to be honest. I wasn't here, and I wouldn't want to speak to the ways in which I think it was offered in equal measure to everyone in the district. I have to say, I think quite highly of the folks who came before me, specifically in my role as director of curriculum. Everything I've found seems to reflect intentional planning of adequate professional development that was offered robustly to all. So I'm not sure what went on in individual buildings, but I think at the district level, there was an attention to detail that was impressive, and every effort was made to make a wraparound approach to curriculum implementation with ARC. So I'm hesitant for I would not want anyone to conclude that there was an implementation challenge. I think that maybe that whatever happened thereafter, in the years thereafter, in each building may have differed, but I don't think that was due to poor planning or a lack of planned PD. I think there was a lot on offer.
There's also been a big change in staff.
That's a good point.
So things that might have been professional development in the past may not happen in the present, and you have younger people as staff members.
Yeah.
So how much professional development did they have in the foundational skills is my question.
I can say what's gone on since I've come into the role. Some of you have heard this before, but again, the state has offered and really encouraged, and I've personally strongly encouraged our teachers to partake of the letters training. In addition to that, for teachers who couldn't make that heavy time commitment, I offered structured literacy workshops. Here, I'm actually my prior life, before becoming a curriculum director, as some of you know, was as a reading writing specialist and literacy trainer in this field. So I offered 2 days of workshops last summer. I will repeat those with a focus particularly on these curricular resources if we move forward with them this summer. And so we're doing all that we can to offer every possible opportunity, and there's been such wonderful uptake of it. There's a bubbling energy around robust evidence-based literacy instruction in both of our elementary schools. It's been really exciting to see. Every single day, teachers are sending me articles they've found or interesting strategies they've heard from colleagues. So the current climate of instructional kind of collegial leadership and professional growth is really exciting in this area specifically.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to make sure that you guys have time for the rest of your meeting, so let's keep going. ARC, just briefly, I know that folks are aware that it was a costly program. Setting it aside can feel alarming. So just to be clear, for very good reasons, not all of the units of ARC were purchased initially. As I understand it, that was because they were poorly aligned, some of them, to science standards. They appeared to teachers and students to be science units, and yet were not aligned to the NGSS science standards. So rightly so, they were set aside. However, that left gaps in the trajectory of foundational skills, unfortunately. Again, reasonable decision, absolutely makes sense, but had an unintended consequence. So the result is that there was no systematic or explicit phonics instruction that was part of the materials that were purchased. ARC has produced some materials aligned to the science of reading, or that they take a particular approach that's not particularly well aligned to the training our teachers are receiving, but you can argue that it's a reasonable approach. I then, as soon as I unpacked what was going on, priced out what it would cost for us to get those additional materials, and you can see the figure there. It was high, $260,000+. And so at that point, it seemed reasonable to convene a stakeholder committee and an educator committee to take a look at whether we wanted to spend that kind of money doubling down on ARC or move on. In our initial work, we gathered a committee that includes a grade level representative from each grade in both schools, a single reading specialist, and both principals. No one in the entire committee wanted to advance ARC beyond the first round of decision making, so it was set aside. We're gonna move on. So this is just the timeline that you've seen a bunch of times to revoice for those of you who are new to our group. We have moved through some PD last summer, through committee formation this fall, and we are now hoping to adopt a foundational skills program for implementation in the fall, and to proceed with a 2-phase pilot program for our knowledge building and language comprehension program. That has begun and will continue through next year. The idea being that around this time next year, I'd be bringing forth a recommendation to you for that piece of the puzzle. Quickly, without going into a reading instruction lesson, this is a well-known science of reading framework for understanding the many skills that are part of skilled and proficient reading. Our committee used this as a way to think about our curriculum examination. I did not remember that there were animations there, I apologize. So if you look at the blue chunk, word recognition, that's what we mean when we're talking about foundational skills. They are the focus of K1 and 2 instruction, and they continue to be important throughout elementary school. The resources we're discussing today and bringing forth for your consideration are rooted in those blue strands. Our knowledge building and language comprehension will be the pilot, that's the red. We're not going to focus our conversation on that today. So the two recommendations that we have for you to consider are UFLY, which is the University of Florida Literacy Institute's Foundations program for grades pre-K through 2, And then spellography, which is a program designed to shore up foundational skills in grades 3 and 4. In brief, UFly is an evidence-based program. For those of you who like to talk about stats, it's the effect size from their implementation pilot was outstanding. I have these specific numbers if you want them, but they're blew us out of the water in terms of the impact that this program appeared to have on students. It is cost effective, which is exciting. That allows us to be nimble in the future. Should something new come out in 5 years, we would not be setting aside a hundreds of thousands of dollars program, which I think is an attractive aspect to this, given how research evolves. We want to be able to be responsive. Similarly, spellography is also relatively cost effective, and it's developed by Louisa Motes, who is the person who developed the letters training. She's really a leader in the field. I'm going to quickly walk you through the cost projections, and then I'm sure you have questions, or maybe not. These are the cost projections for the 2 programs. We have some grant funding from our ESSER grants that will support a majority of the UFly setup materials, and then it is a purchase that you'd only need to repurchase replacement cost manuals going forward. Spellography does have workbooks for students, which is what's represented in the year-over-year costs.
And these costs are per what, or total?
Yeah, they seem so cheap.
Total for both elementary schools.
So-
Yeah, seems too cheap, right? It is there are other programs. A contrasting, quite prominent program is Foundations, would be a sort of comparable to UFly. It was used in the district prior to the implementation of ARC. We have some of those supplies around. That company, Wilson Language, is, they sell you a lot of product along with their teacher manuals. So letter boards and manipulatives and all that sort of thing, those really add up. UFly leans on materials that teachers are likely to have already in the classroom, so the upfront costs are drastically reduced.
I'm getting a little nervous, truthfully, seeing small numbers, especially in light, not because I don't like them, but just because, especially in light of what you said sort of anecdotally about the ARC resources, where, you know, we kind of picked and chose because we didn't really like some things, and so we just said we're not going to do that part, and then it turned out we were kind of having big gaps left, and that was unintended, and I look at this and I say, great, but also...
So ARC is a wraparound program, meaning it purports to address both the red strands of that reading rope and the blue strands. Knowledge building and language comprehension programs are more expensive. So if you're looking for the more expensive program, you'll see me in about a year with a radically different cost projection for you to consider. So that's where you get large purchases of student materials that are like bound books or novels. Those cost a lot of money. They need upkeep, and so it is possible to have a low-cost program here.
And thank you, that helps to understand why.
So this is, envision that this is one part of what ARC would have on offer.
So I guess we're talking today about, and you say this year is the blue stuff, the recognition and everything, the foundational skills resource. Great. Wouldn't it make sense to be considering like which programs we're going to choose for that at the same time that we're looking at to make sure that the programs go together with that we're looking at the red ones, or I'm just
Absolutely, great question. So the committee wrangled with this. We broke our thinking into these 2 categories, and then we realized quickly that there are programs that just are trying to do word recognition and foundational skills. There's programs that are just trying to do language comprehension and knowledge building. And then there are programs that are wraparound and are trying to do both. We considered, I assure you, all of them. We considered, I think, close to definitely over 25 different programs. And as we were looking at that, there was serious consideration given to some that were wraparound programs, in part to be nimble and responsive to future innovations. The group decided it was better to segment and pursue separate programs. They don't need to be produced by the same company to work well in an ELA block. So that's a great question.
And has it, like, has the extent to which that's gonna require additional planning time or anything for teachers been sort of factored in and considered and?
Yep.
Good, that's all.
In a word, yep, we have.
We're in the position of sort of trusting your judgment.
If this
It's also
moves
like-
forward, we've written some grant activities to provide workshop opportunities for teachers to come in over the summer, up to 3 full days, learn with me for one of those days, prepare as a team for the other 2 days to be ready to go. There are professional development opportunities through each of these programs that they would be pursuing on their 2 days of team planning. So that's how I've structured it. We won't move that forward unless the resource is approved. MJ. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously we change programs every once in a while, so there are always kids that are going to kind of be midstream. They learned in one program and now you're transitioning to the other. So what kind of happens under this new program, especially the kids that are in 3rd or 4th grade, or the kids that have gone to 5th grade now, or will be next year when you implement it, and they're also deficient in these skills? Are there plans to kind of help them catch up as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just this past Monday during our in-service day, I held some informational sessions at each of the elementary schools about these programs, and we were really focusing on UFly, but our 3rd grade teachers came and were listening because we anticipate that because those 3rd graders next year haven't had this instruction consistently, that they're actually going to need to start next year with some UFly lessons to create a rapid on-ramp before they begin the spellography program. So our year 1 implementation will look different from our future year implementation, but we are wrangling that now and trying to think about that. As far as our middle school students, the story is a little bit different by the time they get to middle school. The way that you remediate skill gaps is different in some ways from the ways that you would sort of treat a whole cohort of students. We lean on our reading interventionists at the middle school, and there's a big press to get them trained in the school of instruction that aligns to this practice, that structured literacy. So a way to think about it is science of reading is the body of research. Structured literacy is the approach you take in response to that body of research. So that's what we're doing right now, is trying to provide opportunities for those interventionists to be really well trained and move forward remediating.
Richard?
Did I hear you correctly when you said some of the material that's being replaced involves 3 queuing?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm glad to see it go. Okay.
Yeah, it's concerning. So it's good for it to go.
So my question is a little bit random, but when you say University of Florida Institute, a little concerned about anything coming out of Florida these days.
Yeah. It's funny
Cannot
because
throw Florida out
so
of the
Not
bathwater.
everything in Florida is bad.
The state.
But-
well, I'll let you finish the question. Is it just sort of a Florida, what's up with that question?
No,
Or-
it's like, are we making sure that the material coming out of Florida meets the standard that we would like our students
Yes.
to be educated
So
with?
from an academic standpoint, I can say that there are certain centers, academic research centers, that are particularly renowned in the field of literacy and specifically early literacy acquisition. 2 of them are in Florida, oddly. The UFly is one, and the Florida Center for Reading Research, FCRR, is another. I can't explain kind of I'd be maybe more concerned if this was the knowledge building end of the spectrum where content comes in, or not concerned, I should say. I would be asking different questions. These are known institutions that are well respected, but good question. I think the fact that UFly is from UFly is one of the reasons that it's taken off so well, because that's an institution that was educating us in the field for the last 10 years, and they were late to produce a product and try to sell it to you, and they've intentionally priced it with a modest price structure so that it can maximize access for all districts. There's a lot to recommend the group there. I think it's admirable that they did not rush to monetize their research.
So, Kevin, did you have you look like you're going to ask a question? No?
I'm just making sure I understand. You're saying there's like a $263,000 hole in ARC that you can plug with $13,000 worth of material.
I'm not plugging all of it with this. I'm just plugging the foundational skills piece of it with this. It's, you know, ARC at the upper elementary and middle school grades has a lot to recommend it. The texts are high rigor, which is probably the single biggest factor we look for in a knowledge building program at those upper elementary and early middle school grade levels. So we're actually, ARC will remain in place in 5th and 6th grade for now. We're gonna get this done and then give 5th and 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade an opportunity to take a look at their curriculum at a different time, because what's going on there is not problematic. So it really, this is the first step of a bigger picture.
Sorry, Jessica. Yes, I know. I was telling Wendy stop. Jessica, go. But I got. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
So one of the things the words that you're saying is queuing up for me is you're saying, you know, we're going to give opportunities for our reading specialists to become trained in some of these, you know, science-based literacy that we're promoting. We're going to give opportunities for our teachers to become trained in these things that we believe in as a school district. It's interesting verbiage in terms of, are we not requiring that people become, and I guess I understand that's an instructional question, but and I also, I guess, as it aligns in my head to this question of when we look at the schools and where their sort of rates are, do we look at teachers and their specific classrooms and how different teachers are doing in terms of their results? And are we, I don't need the answers, but it would be great to know that those questions are being asked.
Great.
Can I just
sure, yeah. Piggyback on, and then I'm going
that.
to say something and then ask Amy if she has anything to add.
So I think the question I have too is, are teachers coming into teaching being trained differently? And so is that something we're asking? So is there sort of like in the last 5 years, teachers have been trained in a similar method to ARC, and so that's part of the problems, and so our more seasoned teachers have had some of the phonics stuff in place?
That is such a great question. So let me get to that in a minute. So first the first part of your question, if I can restate what I think I heard, was, are we making this type of training an expectation or a requirement? And I would,
like the R word.
I would use the phrase professional expectation. It is, so we are giving, I said this to groups of teachers on Monday, we are giving you as a teacher a lot of opportunities to come along with us and learn. And then in the fall, it is an expectation, a requirement that you are ready to teach these programs. That would be the way I would phrase it. And going forward at all levels, I think in all New Hampshire public schools, it is a professional expectation that you are teaching in a way that is aligned to the science of reading going forward. That's the first part. As far as looking at data, building a data literacy culture is something that I know my predecessor was really invested in and was working productively with teachers to begin to look at class level data and ask thoughtful questions about their own teaching practice, and my hope is that we will continue that. I'm blessed with great building leaders who are also really data literate, and Amy, who has a lot of experience in coaching groups of teachers forward in that process, so I'll say that process is ongoing. And finally, Wendy, the circumstance from a professional learning standpoint is sort of the opposite of what you just said. More experienced teachers, when I came through my own teacher training a million years ago, I was trained in what at the time was thought to be best practice, which is the 3 queuing system and balanced literacy that we now know isn't actually aligned to how young brains learn to read, or old brains, all brains. And so it tends to actually be our younger, or more recently trained, not younger, Karen, Director of Equity and Curriculum. Our more recently trained teachers tend to be coming out of programs that provided robust instruction in this approach. And so it's sort of those of us who've been around the block for a while who may need retraining. Amy, do you want to add to any
Sure, and I
parts of
think
that?
as we look to hire, especially our reading specialists, we are asking for them to be trained in specific programs of like Orton, Gillingham, Wilson training, so we are asking that upon for those skills. But Karen is correct, and I think institutions of higher ed over teacher prep are all over the place where they are with that training.
I'll also add Karen Woolsey has been partnering with me to provide opportunities for the special education staff in specifically Orton Gillingham, which is an approach related to this whole family of instruction that is particularly useful for students who are identified as having orthographic dyslexia.
Okay, good.
I just have one.
Wait, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, and this is less about the program adoption, all that sort of stuff, but when we, launch any reading program, one of the things we need is a partnership with families and parents, and so I'm curious to know what discussion has happened about how we're going to engage families in this work and get them engaged reading early, and help them with those strategies at home. And maybe discussion has not happened, but that's my question.
I'm glad you're bringing it up. I'll be honest and say those discussions haven't happened yet, but they need to happen between now and next September as we bring these materials forth. They both have home components, so UFly has a home newsletter that can go home to help parents understand what specific skills their child's been introduced to. It's an interleaved approach, so families can help students revisit the skills that they've been taught. And so I'm glad you're bringing that up. It's certainly something that we need to devote some attention to, and I'm just going to be honest and say we have not yet, but we will make a plan.
Any additional questions? Okay, so we do need an action, motion on this. Someone?
Is this motion to adopt?
Yeah.
All right, I will make the motion to adopt and implement the proposed foundational skills resources, UFly and spellography, for the fall of 2024 for grades K through 4.
Thanks. Okay, I'll do motion by Tia, second by Richard. We'll spread it around. Any additional discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? No? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your patience. This was longer than I usually take in your meeting, so thank you.
It was definitely you doing most of it.
Yeah, great question.
Okay, we are going to go into a non-public under...
I will make a motion to go into non-public under NHRSA 91A32K.
Okay, can I get a second for that? Motion by MJ, second by Tia. We need to do a roll call vote for that. Tia?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I'm a yes. MJ?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Okay, and then we will come back. Yeah, if you have a... Okay, we are going to move on to unfinished business. So 9A, just to get everybody reoriented to your agendas. Discussion and action on second readings.
So I will make a motion to approve policies under 9A and B, so EEAA and JICC.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Do you want to tell us anything about this, or? There's second reading, so we've
There's
seen these
second
before.
reading, yeah.
Okay. Any questions on this? No? Okay. All those in favor of moving, of approving, EEAA and JICC, please raise your hands. Okay. It's 8-0. Richard's still out. He'll be here in a minute. All right. Okay, and then that moves us on to new business. And we're moving to starting with letter D, but all of those policies.
So the first question for my board colleagues, is there any policy that we need to pull out of this group to discuss individually?
Okay, so we're in new business, and so we're looking at the first readings of the policies from D through M, right? Is that correct? On the agenda? L? Sorry.
M,
M,
right.
yeah,
It
M,
would be
D
M,
through M, okay.
Oh, well, we need to withdraw one. Do we need-
Yeah.
Okay, so D through K, no, D through J, thank you. We'll worry about the withdrawals later. D through K. So Wendy's question is, are there any of these, so what we normally will do is move forward the whole bunch to second reading unless there are policies that people have a particular concern with and want to talk about individually. We'll take those out, and then the ones that people have no issues with, beyond grammatical issues, which you can always have issues with, then we will pass through the group and then talk about the individual ones. So does anybody want to take any of these out individually for additional discussion?
I had a very quick one, but it's in my notes that I'm still.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm in a terrible state of closing the book.
It'll come back, don't worry. It takes a minute. MJ has one for me.
So I just have a question. Under EBCE, school closings, just the phrasing of that last sentence under afternoon and evening program cancellations.
So EBCE actually is going to be withdrawn.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
There you go. My packet's out of order.
Yeah. Any other questions people have? Yeah.
When we do withdraw them, is that because they've been superseded by other policy? Is that just generally how that works?
Yep.
I mean, I had a question on IC, which was, there are some kind of inconsistencies with the days and the hours, and I feel like every district's policy IC is a mess like that. I don't know how crazy we want to get on it.
So we did ask those specific questions because we track by hours in the Lebanon School District as far as for student education hours, and our CBAs are currently done by days. And the Karen Dubois was in there with us as well as Amy, and I think the general feeling is that we, from policy committee, is to leave the language the way that it is. So Karen and EC and went through and revised this a little bit. And so to keep the language as is, because one of the things that we haven't clarified sort of as a district yet and may come up when there's negotiations is if we have snow days, do we hold to contract days or do we hold to, so we haven't quite worked all of those details out. And so at the moment, the feeling from the administrators is this is the best language to keep and then modify.
I think we're also trying to wait and see what the new 306 regulations are in terms of all of this. So this just provides for some flexibility, I believe.
Okay.
So
Did you find your
I had a couple of things. One was just a general note on policies. When revising, I was wondering if we could make it a general policy of trying to eliminate gendered language from the policies.
We do. So if you find it, you note
Okay,
it.
so a lot of these
Yeah.
have he/she's
Yeah.
in them, and
So we'll change that. So,
Okay.
I think, we had asked,
yeah, we've asked to do that, but it hasn't been done. So if you find it, note it. So what I do we have a policy, or if we have grammatical changes like that, you can just make grammatical changes on a draft and hand it to Amy.
Oh,
Those
great.
changes can be made, so we don't have to go over each one, if they're not changing the meaning or the thrust of the, so something like that would be easy we can change it.
great. And then I had a question about 10F, which is JCA,
JCA?
which was just about resigning. There's language in there that says A1F, in determining whether reassignment is in the student's best interest, the superintendent shall consider the student's academic, physical, personal, social needs. Can we offer the superintendent any more guidance on that issue, like things the superintendent might want to consider, or because it feels like there's a lot of things that have to be considered when it gets more legalistic, when there's an appeal and stuff, but there's really very little guidance for the superintendent in terms of what constitutes in the best interest of the student. And I was wondering if that's a thing that we could be adding in, or should be adding in.
with the policy, so the policies are all, the New Hampshire School Board Association gives us sort of like categories of policies. This happens to fall into the priority required by law policy. So it hasn't been, so there are some places where we obviously have some discretion in how we, what we want to say and things like that. We are sometimes reluctant to that because of sort of state law, statute, that kind of thing staying. So this happens to be one of those policies. So Amy, I don't know if you
Want more?
so I don't know if the state dictates sort of the reasoning.
Yeah,
why
a lot of it is
change an
around
assignment.
bullying, and bullying issues for that. And I think that's historically in Lebanon, if we've placed students out of Lebanon district to other local public schools, it's been because of, I would say, social bullying issues.
So do you feel like this gives you enough
Absolutely.
guidance
Yeah.
or coverage?
That's the most important part.
Okay.
For 10G, which is GBEF, this is the one about school district internet access for employees. Just a question if the policy was designed collaboratively with the district's IT team.
Yes, the IT department has seen that.
Okay, just so long as they feel it's feasible.
Yes, you will also see the data governance policy coming soon. It is another required one that is currently with the IT department.
Awesome. And then the last thing that I kind of wanted to kind of bring was items 10H and I together, which are bus routes and transportation services, EAB and EEA. And I'm just wondering what, I guess, two things. One, how far do we want students to, what's the maximum we want students to walk?
So that did come up in our discussions as well. And these policies are set at the outer limits.
Okay.
And our practice is different. So we don't, but we wanted to leave the policy sort of at the outer limits in case there was a situation where we had to stretch it to that. So we wanted to have that flexibility.
Okay. I just thought it was funny that like a student who was just under 2 miles away from the school would have to walk 2 miles, but a student who was taking the bus would have to walk less than that to get to the.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we pick students up less than 2 miles from school.
Yeah.
The old policy was, I think it's a half mile or something. It was really restrictive and hard, so.
Okay.
turnarounds and being able to be in safe spots to provide a bus stop.
And I'm sure you're already doing this, but I wanted to see if we could put it in writing in 10H. Paragraph 2 says priority and distance to stops will be given to younger children, and I wondered if we could add and students with limited mobility.
So what you're referring to the agenda number? If you could refer to the policy title.
EEAB.
Okay, we don't know what you're saying.
Sorry.
So EEAB and what paragraph?
EEAB, paragraph 2.
Okay, thanks.
This is about priority and distance to stops being given to younger children, and I just thought we might add and students with limited mobility. I assume you're
I think that
already.
Would that be a specialized transportation policy? That might fall under the specialized transportation
okay.
policy, right?
Put that down to me being new here.
No, that's good.
Oh
Those
gosh,
are
those are good
That's a
questions.
good question.
We know that you're reading, so that makes policy happy.
Any other questions?
I think that's
about
it for
these?
me. Thank you for
Do you have the
bearing with me.
specific policies that listed the she and he or?
I didn't make notes
Okay,
of them.
I'll just make-
But I can
okay.
find those for you probably by the end of the day tomorrow if you want them.
Well, I think just before, I mean, because these are all going
First reading, I can
to
make sure.
second reading.
Yeah.
So when Lori, if we can, Tim's got some. Tim.
Maybe it's too picky, but in IC, I'm wondering, it says a school year for teachers and other certified personnel, professionals shall be 185 days. There are people who are certified who are not school year employees, so I'm wondering if we need to worry about that. The director of CIA, myself, this director of special ed, for example. So I don't know if that should be worded differently. I don't know if it's a big deal, but just wanted to
Well, the
point that out.
next part of that sentence says, unless otherwise determined by the board, applicable CBA or individual
Right,
contract.
okay,
So
all right,
then,
so good.
yeah, that does cover
I don't
it.
want somebody saying, I'm done.
You're done, right?
I think it's probably referring to our
That was actually-
psychologists and our.
You're right, I know what the intent
Yeah.
was.
Oh, yeah. I think it does.
You were thinking you're leaving at 185?
You were wrong. Okay, so any others on this group? All right, so we need a motion. Wendy.
So I'll make a motion to move the following policies to a second reading. EBCD, JCA, GBEF, EEAB, EEA, and IC.
Okay. And can we get a second?
I'll second.
Tia? Okay, motion by Wendy. No more discussion. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you.
So this is, the wording of this motion is awkward in that we don't want to completely withdraw we want to keep these sort of moving with these group of policies. So the withdrawal will also go to a second.
Okay. Withdrawal goes to a second reading, so go ahead and make that.
So policy EBCE, ICA, and EEA-R, and BBB-R.
Okay, the motion is that they will go to a second reading to be withdrawn.
Yep.
Right? Okay, can I get a second for that? Tia, excellent, sorry, Mary. Fast.
Sorry, you were already looking
I was
at me,
pointing
so
at her
I'm
already.
like-
Make the second.
Let's make it
All right, all those in favor? Oh, yes,
So
sorry.
can I just
there's
ask a question? Why do you want to just move them on to a second and not immediately withdraw them?
Well, just
out of
because until
curiosity.
we have the other policies, a lot of these policies are being withdrawn because they're embedded in some of these other policies. So I think we just want to make sure that those are already approved before we.
So that we don't end up with a policy vacuum.
Sounds logical.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, excellent. All right, moving on to get my agenda, let's see where we are. Okay, next thing is we need a motion to accept the common good donation of $1,800 for LHS diversity supplies.
Make a motion to accept the common good donation of $1,800 for the LHS diversity supplies.
And a second by Mary. Do you have any additional information on it?
It's for their diversity club, and the common good is that new nonprofit that's been formed.
Okay. Any questions, anyone? All right, all those in favor? Great, and we would like to thank the Common Good for their donation. and their next donation as well. We need a motion to accept the common good donation of $760 to the LHS GenLynk Club for supplies.
I'll make a motion to accept the common good donation of $760 for the LHS GenLynk supplies.
And that's that. A motion by MJ, second by Mary. And that is the club that Nora started, right, for relationships between seniors and high school students. So, and that's, again, another donation from the Common Good. Any other information about that?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. All right, before we move on to committee updates, I have your assignments for your committees. So just keeping in mind, just pass these down. I'm gonna do it like this. Keep in mind that there's no way to have them be completely even. We have an uneven number of people and we have an uneven number of, there's 2 pages, and you'll pass the rest down. An uneven number of people and an uneven number of assignments. So, I know.
So doesn't Jeff. I didn't realize there were 2 pages.
There are 2 pages. There are 2 pages.
Oh.
All right, so does everybody have 2 pages? Excellent. So you'll notice on the first page is a bunch of color that has all of the assignments of where people are. The summary of that is on the second page. If you just want to look at like your name and what you were assigned to. There's a lot of things that go into this. People's availability, people's preferences, people's positions heretofore, people's current and future commitments. So lots of things have come in. If you're unhappy, well, let me know.
About this.
About this. Right. And I'll do my best. Yeah, we've made some adjustments. There's been a lot of going back and forth. And I think we're at a place where I feel good about it, so we'll see how it works. These are not ever set in stone. And generally speaking, if you need someone to sub for you for a meeting that you're going to miss so that you don't have so that you have a quorum, you can always reach out to other board members or to me to fulfill that so that we don't have meetings canceled. Right, did I make a mistake already?
You said MJ was new on the academic.
Yeah.
She's
No, so that means, so that means, yes, she's returning. Sorry, there was somebody else there. That means new, not new to the board, just new to that committee, and that was a mistake, so I'll fix that on the...
After you did all this work, Lil, I just wanted to be mean to you about the...
No, it's fine. It's totally fine.
This wasn't a lot of work.
No, the format was done before me. I was just adding into the stuff in the format. So anyway, those are the assignments. So, yay. PNN has not been a heavy lift. It will be a more heavy lift going into this year because we do have a contract with LEA, right? That's up for negotiation. So that'll be. And then once you meet your first meeting, obviously you're going to pick a chair from among you, and you can decide who that's going to be for the standing committees. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Do you have any questions now?
I have a quick question
Yes.
on just parsing the information on this.
Yes,
It says the times of the meetings,
but not the days.
but not the dates or days of the week.
Right, so right now, it says the times because that's the only thing we know for sure.
Okay.
Those can be changed within the committee. You can certainly change them, and the days of the weeks have been shifting around often, so I don't think any of them actually, I think maybe EC meets on the same day of the week always, but the other ones shift a little bit, so that's why it's like that.
So policy is tending to be Mondays at 8:50,
8:50.
once a month.
Okay, so policies is tend to be Mondays.
Okay.
And
Once a month?
now at 8:15,
8:15.
once a month, yes.
Yes.
Yes, most of the standard ones are once a month now.
And we go until Kevin has to leave.
Or meet at 8:17.
It's a lot of power.
All right. Thank you all for getting back to me in a timely manner, and for giving lots of helpful information about your other commitments. That was very helpful for me. And those are the assignments also on that sheet, are the assignments of the building assignments. So for those, you're assigned to be kind of the liaison for the various buildings. for budget season in particular, but also going forward, we'd like for the people who are assigned to a building to go and visit that building at least twice per year outside of budget time. So I'm going to put it on you right now to reach out to your building principals. They don't know who you are yet. I'll send an announcement to them, but they don't know who's assigned to whom. But I would leave it to you to reach out to them and make an arrangement to come and just talk to them and become their friends. In theory, you would be their advocates during budget season because you would know a lot about what's going on in their buildings already and what their needs are and all of that. So that doesn't happen if you just have one budget meeting with them. It happens if you go and meet them more often. So that would be the best practice I would recommend going forward. Okay, great. Committee updates. F&F, next meeting is, well, I don't know. It hasn't been set. When is your next meeting doing?
We don't know. Usually they're at 4:15 though, not 4.
So, you know, these have changed.
Yeah. Do
4:15.
need to get one on the books.
Okay, so we'll stay tuned. Policy Committee, your next meeting is April 15th at 8:15 a.m. at the SAU office. EC, Education Committee, your next meeting is Monday, April 1st at 4 p.m. at the SAU office. All these times are off, so just scratch that from the, that part is completely wrong, I see. PNN will meet starting in the fall if we're doing negotiations. They start in the fall.
We've typically started in the fall, but we're thinking we'd like to meet
A little bit in the summer.
Yeah.
Okay, so potentially meeting in late summer, okay? Student Wellness Advisory Committee, the next meeting is Wednesday, May 8th.
So,
Yes?
sorry. If that is going to happen over the summer, though, what I would love that hasn't happened, when that is happening, is for there to be some kind of meeting of the board to review, so the board can sort of give input or thoughts into what is going to be negotiated.
Right, so I think what would happen is if PNN meets over the summer, then, and it would be late summer, that at that first meeting that we meet, our first full board meeting, that we talk about where are we in the negotiation process, and where we as a board want to be, what we want to put on the table and what we don't, and sort of talk about then, because that would be before negotiations have really started, but.
I think a meeting in late summer before, I think that's exactly what can happen if we do that. Like, we go into negotiations and nobody really has a game plan.
Yeah, so they're talking about meeting a game plan before you meet with the unions.
Yeah, because I mean, I think, unfortunately, from my perspective, what has happened sometimes is a full negotiation process has happened before the board as a whole is sort of giving some input, and so what comes back to us is a negotiated contract, to which then we just agree.
Well,
and I
do want to, just so maybe it helps how the process works. I've been in a lot of these, and they're run by Jim O'Shaughnessy. So even if you don't meet, the first meeting is a sort of an organizational meeting with the other side, and then the next negotiating meeting, the other side always presents first. So the board, whether it's come back to you or not, I just want to give you some ways that Jim always makes sure that your proposal, which is what you want, comes after their first proposal.
Yeah.
So that there should be, the board should feel that there's time, that no proposal goes from the board until after you guys talk. You guys shouldn't see anything for 3 months.
So I think the thing is we just want to make sure that that people who are on PNN, that we're communicating frequently with the rest of the board.
And then we're giving PNN some direction as to what our intention.
Collaboratively communicating. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. All right, sorry. We were at Student Wellness Advisory Committee, which is next meets Wednesday, May 8th at 3:30 p.m. at the SAU office. HACTC's next meeting will be Tuesday, May 21st at 10 a.m. That is one change on the list, is Mary is going, but also Richard is going with you. So I think Mary does an excellent job, and I just like more of us to know what's going on with the HACTC. So that was a change from previous practice. Area Committee, the next meeting is Tuesday, May 14th at 6 p.m. And where is that? Is that?
That would be right here.
Here, okay, at LMS. All right. And the School and District City Task Force, we don't know.
May 23rd.
It's May 23rd, not May 14th. Just kidding. May 23rd is the City Task Force?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. May 23rd is the City Task Force, May 14th is the area meeting. And one other change on the assignments that I didn't mention is that I have also included, sort of formalized a little bit, not made it a standing committee, but formalized the legislative affairs team, for lack of a better name. That is, has been Tia and Mary, and I'm adding John to that list. And what I would hope for you all to do is kind of envision, how is that going to work going forward? Do we want this to be a standing committee? Do we want this to be an ad hoc committee? Do we want this to be a advisory committee? Do we want it? What is it that we want to have that happen going forward? There's not you are only 3, which is, so it's not a full committee yet on purpose, but we can change that. But I'd like you all to talk together about how we want to do that as part of your job going forward. Okay? All right. Future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions? Yes.
So I have really appreciated in the last couple of months, we've had a couple of presentations around different areas within the schools. We had the music presentation, we've had a couple of others. They've been very informative and enjoyable. One of the areas that I am curious about the district's approach and sort of what programming exists, and I'd love to hear more about in a future meeting, would be outdoor education. Outdoor education is well documented as providing strong supports for emotional, intellectual, and behavioral development, as well as supporting students' mental health and academic performance, and sort of comes under the same auspices. And I haven't heard very much about what the district's strategy, approach, programming is around outdoor education, so it would be wonderful to hear more about that someday.
And I think we could include the Hanover Street School, the grants they're writing for playground improvement as part of that. So, yeah, great. That's a good idea. Thank you. Any others? Questions, recommendations, future agenda? MJ, sorry, go. Questions, recommendations? No? All right. Important dates, district announcements. The next school board meeting will be Wednesday, April 17th at 6:30 p.m. at the LMS cafeteria. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, MJ makes a motion to adjourn, second by Mary. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Appreciate your